Bridges sway, infrastructure swept away, roads damaged. Nepal is facing a fresh flood threat, just a day after devastating flash floods tore through the Rasuwa district near the Nepal-China border. At least 160 people have been killed, while more than 800 remain missing after a massive surge of water and debris swept through the region. But now, scientists are warning that the danger may not be over. An upstream blockage is reportedly still lodged near the source of the disaster, raising fears that another sudden release of water could trigger a second major flood downstream. Nepal is on high alert. Just as rescue teams continue searching for hundreds of people missing after a devastating flash flood, scientists are warning that another potentially dangerous surge could be building upstream. The threat is centered around the Looms, a river near the Nepal-China border. The warning comes after a catastrophic flood tore through Nepal's Rasuwa district, leaving a trail of destruction and claiming at least 160 lives. Entire stretches of the region were hit by a sudden wall of water, mud and debris. Roads were damaged, infrastructure was swept away, and communities downstream were left scrambling for safety. Now, authorities are facing a new and potentially even more dangerous challenge: the possibility of another sudden release of water from upstream. Scientists from the International Center for Integrated Mountain Development say an ice avalanche in the Looms is suspected to have triggered the initial disaster. But investigators are still trying to establish exactly what caused the massive surge. And while the investigation continues, one major concern remains. Scientists say a blockage is still lodged upstream. That blockage could potentially hold back water, and if it fails suddenly, a new surge could race downstream, carrying huge quantities of water, ice, rock and debris with it. That is why the latest warning has raised fears of a second major flood. The situation is particularly worrying because of the geography of the region. Nepal's Himalayan landscape means that sudden changes upstream can have devastating consequences for communities located far downstream. A blockage can act like a temporary natural dam. Water accumulates behind it. But if that barrier collapses, the stored water can be released rapidly, creating a powerful flood wave. And scientists are now watching closely for precisely that possibility. Reports indicate that evacuation orders have been issued for Geelong Port, close to the affected area. Authorities are assessing river levels and watching for any signs that another surge could be developing. The scale of the first flood shows just how quickly the situation can change. At Galkshi, water levels in the Trishulai River reportedly rose by around 9 meters in just 30 minutes. That kind of sudden rise leaves very little time for communities to respond. Further downstream, at Malakhu, the river level reportedly climbed by around 7 meters. The numbers underline the extraordinary force of the flood. What may have started as an event high in the mountains quickly transformed into a deadly downstream disaster. And now, the possibility of another release has placed emergency authorities on alert. Rescue operations are continuing despite the difficult conditions. Teams are searching for those still missing. Authorities are also working to assess damage to roads, bridges and other critical infrastructure. But the scale of the disaster has made the operation extremely challenging. Large quantities of debris have been carried downstream. Access to affected areas has been disrupted. And with the possibility of another flood, rescuers themselves are facing additional risks. That is why monitoring the upstream blockage has become a priority. Scientists and authorities need to determine how stable the blockage is. They also need to understand how much water may be accumulating behind it. And perhaps most importantly, they need to determine what could happen if that blockage suddenly gives way. For people living downstream, the uncertainty is frightening. The first flood arrived with devastating speed. And another sudden surge could potentially leave communities with little time to react. The warning also highlights a broader danger facing communities in the Himalayan region. Climate and geological changes can interact in unpredictable ways. Ice avalanches, landslides, glacial processes and sudden river blockages can all contribute to flash flood events. And when these events occur in steep mountain terrain, the resulting water can move extremely quickly. The Looms incident is now under investigation. Scientists are studying satellite imagery and other available information to understand how the event unfolded. The objective is to determine what triggered the initial surge and how the upstream blockage could affect the situation in the hours ahead. Meanwhile, the human toll from the first disaster continues to rise. At least 160 people have been confirmed dead. More than 800 people remain missing. Families are still waiting for information about loved ones. and emergency teams are continuing their search through areas covered in mud, rocks and debris. The disaster has also raised urgent questions about preparedness. In mountainous regions, early warning systems can mean the difference between life and death. When a river can rise several meters within minutes, every warning matters. Every minute matters. And every evacuation decision can become critical. That is why scientists are urging continued vigilance. Even though the initial flood has passed, the danger from the upstream blockage has not necessarily disappeared. Authorities are therefore treating the situation as an evolving emergency. The immediate priority is to monitor the blockage, track river levels and keep vulnerable communities informed. At the same time, rescue teams are continuing their efforts to locate the missing and provide assistance to those affected by the first wave. The coming hours could be crucial. If the upstream blockage remains stable, the immediate threat could ease. But if it collapses, another sudden release of water and debris could occur. And after witnessing how quickly the Trishulai River rose during the first disaster, authorities are taking the warning seriously. Nepal is therefore facing two emergencies at once. One is the enormous humanitarian crisis left behind by the devastating flash floods. The other is the possibility that another surge could still be waiting upstream. For now, scientists continue to assess the risk. Emergency teams remain on the ground. Downstream communities are being monitored. And authorities are urging people in vulnerable areas to remain alert and follow evacuation instructions. The full cause of the Rasuwa disaster is still being investigated. But one thing is already clear. The deadly flood has shown the extraordinary speed and power with which water can move through Nepal's mountain valleys. And until scientists can determine the stability of the remaining upstream blockage, the threat is far from over. Nepal now waits and watches the rivers as rescue operations continue and scientists work to determine whether the mountains could unleash another deadly surge.